going to have to act if we want to live in a different world.
Hello, I'm Victor Von Zoom, and with me is Braving Ruin.
Greetings.
And I'm going to be doing an interview and a discussion with him about the artist formerly known as EdgySphinx.
EdgySphinx is dead.
Long live EdgySphinx. So, Braving, when you were EdgySphinx, and I'm just, let's just get this out of the way. We'll do the setup. What was you've stated it before, but just to be clear, what was the impetus for you to start making YouTube videos and make your voice be heard?
Well, I have sort of, I had views that I didn't really have anybody to talk to about, even when I was, sort of more moderated, and, I guess I don't really consider myself all that extreme, but some people probably would. But I wasn't quite all the way there when I started. I was more of a more typical anti-SJW, like free speecher type of person. And even at that level, I lived in a very liberal area and didn't really have anybody to talk to about this stuff in real life. And so it's the same story everyone else has, really,
You feel isolated?
Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, you've described it before. Your quest to where you are now was kind of a long journey, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, because in my early 20s, I was a leftist, and I guess kind of what you would call an SJW by current standards. And just gradually over time, I sort of transitioned from, first it started to seem like the social justice stuff didn't make sense. So I became a sort of a more basic conservative or libertarian or something like that, a roaming millennial type of mindset.
Yeah.
And then from there I started moving further right wing, and it was kind of okay, well, we do need a stronger element of authority than that. We need to maybe we should cut back on immigration, and we should put our own country first. And you started going into that kind of civic nationalist mindset. And then it just sort of, it's weird. You don't really consciously notice the change to, I guess, what you would call alt-right. It just kind of happens. You wake up one day and you're there.
Yeah. Or rather,
it can happen really quickly too. I've seen people change their minds on this stuff in within a couple of weeks. It took me longer than that, but
No, usually people subconsciously will have stronger opinions on stuff than they realize, and then they just kind of need a kick in one direction or another to really, self-actualize. Wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Oh. So, would you say that during your earlier YouTube career, you were still undergoing this kind of, process of, you knew what was right, you knew deep down in your gut what was right, what was wrong, and you knew more or less how you wanted to state how you felt about everything, but you weren't exactly sure what position, how to define your positions, right?
Right. I mean, it's really weird because even at the beginning, looking back, I feel like I was kind of overtly what you would call racist. It wasn't really in the, Mike Cernovich kind of way where it's okay, well, you have plausible deniability that you're quote unquote racist, or that you think, or that you think different groups of people matter. Because I think maybe the second video I did was a response to Francesca Ramsey, where she was saying that white people aren't a real thing or something like that.
Hmm.
And and I, of course, at the time wasn't as, I guess, knowledgeable as I would consider myself now. I wouldn't have thought to say the things that I would say now. I wouldn't have provided the sources that I would provide now. But I still had this just like inkling that it's like, well, no, that's not, no. It's really strange. I almost can't even explain. It's like you feel something and you feel strongly about it, but you don't know how to put it into words. And then one day you realize how to put it into words. It's one of those kinds of things.
Indeed.
So when I was calling myself a civic nationalist, I essentially meant the same things that I mean now. Like, the things, the positions that I express now were sort of implicit in that. And, and if the policies that I had wanted were, put in place and called civic nationalism, like let's have extremely strict immigration policy, like let's put our country first and let's put our citizenry first and all this stuff, it would effectively have the same result. But I guess it's just sort of this like people, it seems like the whole civic nationalist thing, and I think this applies to me, is people just don't want to be called racist. They don't want to have to be put in that position where they actually say that that yes, culture is connected to groups of people. Yes, behavior differs across groups of people. Intelligence differs across groups of people. So we should keep these things in mind when we're deciding, who we let in and who we associate with and all this stuff. I think pretty much every civic nationalist knows this in their heart. And they just don't want to openly say it. Like, look at Lauren Southern. She did that, recently she did that Great Replacement video, which in my opinion was not a very good video because she limited herself by primarily talking about Muslims as if that's the only problem. As if there aren't, it's more of a genetic population thing because it's not just, the behavior that we're seeing in Europe, the spike in crime rates and the ghettoization and the sort of separatism, the tribalism that's playing out is not just limited to Muslims. But she sort of limited herself from talking about the full scope of it by, I'll just say Muslims because I don't want to look racist. Instead of, she could have said, she could have named the specific countries that people are coming from instead of just making it a Muslim thing. And I think that's really the difference because other people have made similar videos, and I'm actually working on one too. They've made similar videos that are expressing basically the same general message, but in a much more comprehensive, in a much more coherent way, because they have removed themselves of the burden of, don't sound racist, don't sound racist. They take themselves out of that box, and now they can just say what they really think.
Yeah. Well, I believe that as far as that goes, one of the major pushbacks on the right that would be much more beneficial would be not just talking about race in a totally negative way, but talking about it enough in such a way that people are allowed to talk about it instead of it any time the topic's brought up, it turns into a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because that pans into what I believe what you said about how there's a lot of people that don't want to be racist or don't want to be seen as racist. And what the left's kind of done is made it so that if you as any kind of person that could be construed as white, like even brings it up or talks about it or has any opinion on it whatsoever, if it's even an ambient discussion, you are immediately branded as some kind of shit stir in the very least.
Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting. A couple months ago, I'm sure you've heard of LOVEseat.
Yes.
A couple months ago, LOVEseat made a video where he actually, he was talking about how what we call the alt-right is getting traction and how, the whole race realism, quote unquote, conversation is back and all this stuff. And he, I think this was actually in reference to the whole debacle with Blonde in the Belly of the Beast and Spino, where he was accusing her and Christensen of being racist and alt-right dog whistling and all this stuff, like the same shtick that he did with me.
Yeah. Which I honestly wish he would have a discussion with me about that, because I think that we've discussed this before. He has good instincts for when people are doing some shicey stuff, but he doesn't have the correct words to say what they're actually doing.
Yeah, I mean, and also, you know, even though I disagree with Spino on virtually everything, I do think it's important to actually ask people their motivations. Like, ask them why they have the positions they have, why they see the world the way they do, because so few people actually do that. And when you neglect to do that, you're missing out on critical information for why that person thinks the way they do. Instead, we usually just judge them entirely based on like the surface level of what they think and what they're espousing and all that, and people generally don't seem to care why the person is doing it.
Indeed.
But anyway, okay, yeah, so Woz made this video where he was talking about that whole thing, and he had a really candid moment in it. No pun intended. He basically said something to the effect of, you know, it used to be that you would call the person racist, and then the conversation became about the fact that they were racist and them defending, you know, trying to convince you that they're not racist and defending that they're racist. But now it's starting to become like people like me or people like Blonde or Matt Christensen. I mean, they're not really, at least as far as I know, they're not as extreme as I am, quote unquote extreme. But the point is, Woz essentially conceded that the word racist has totally lost its edge, and now a lot of the time people will just be like, okay, fine. If caring about this issue or seeing this issue in a certain way makes me racist, then I'm racist. What are you going to do about it? Like, tell me why I'm wrong, essentially. And he seemed to think of that as a bad thing, because it's like, you know, for someone who's more to the left, it's like that's one of their chief tactics that they rely on to shut this kind of thing down, is just, oh, well, you're racist. And then the conversation becomes about that. But now people are actually starting to sort of grow a pair and say, okay, fine. You want to call me racist? Fine. Tell me why I'm wrong about this.
And then they have nothing.
Yeah. Because they haven't thought about it that far. They haven't thought that far ahead because they're so used to just saying that.
Being able to shame you out of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I suppose, and that, the idea of shame and Spino brings us to what I think would be quite a cardinal question with all of this. What you want to walk me and any of our listeners through how you felt about what happened with Kraut when they, because to be quite honest, I've kind of went on a journey myself, and this is not about me, obviously, but I kind of went on a journey myself as far as you were concerned, because your videos, amongst others, but you were one of the big ones up there, were an impetus for me to start my own kind of thing. And I don't mean that in the way that I wanted to go do informative videos and everything else. You guys had that handled. I started a podcast because I was incredibly angry with the skeptic community. And over time, I started being angry at the skeptic community. I was angry at the skeptic community for other things before, but I was angry at them for how they treated you in one direction. And then slowly over time, I came to see how that whole thing went down and was angry with them for another.
For Spino.
Yes, I was.
Which if I can just cut in, I think that is totally valid, because, you know, again, I think Spino is an autistic fuckwit. I don't like him as a person, but that doesn't change the fact that they essentially treated him the same way that they've treated a bunch of other people, myself included, where it's just kind of like, it's like a burn the witch kind of thing.
Yeah.
He was saying stuff that they, that was verboten in their little community. And they basically dogpiled on him.
Yeah,
and even though I think he's wrong about pretty much everything, you know, even though I don't like him, I still think that that's more wrong for them to do, because he did have some valid criticism of them.
Oh yeah, well he made the mistake of attacking their golden calf of Sargon through parody and satire, no less. and that was that was where they showed their true colors. I mean, I had, and I've discussed this. I discussed this before when we did the Edgecast together. Which, thank you again for coming on. I had problems with certain members of the skeptic community for their behavior during Gamergate and other controversies and everything. But for a while, I kind of believed the narrative that the alt-right was all very subversive and had kind of, snuck their way into positions. And I'm not to say that, like, when Kraut did his video on you and to a lesser extent, Thorium, I was totally like, yeah, I agree with all of this. But I kind of had I had that feeling like you did, like Spino did, that deep down I knew something was wrong here, but I didn't have the words. Subconsciously I knew something was up, but consciously I didn't have the words or the capacity at the time to fully put together everything. And I felt that I had felt that I had been cheated. I had felt that, I had been supporting someone that I vehemently disagreed with the entire time, who had convinced me that I didn't disagree with them. And then I realized that was kind of an illusion. That, like, I still like Spino. I still think that he has he has the potential to have some merit to him, because, I mean, to be frank, he's been around with the community since before even all the skeptic community things started, and they still burned him and acted like he was some kind of, like, neophyte, which is just strange. And with him, I realize now that I didn't actually agree with him. I don't actually agree much with him anymore on his opinions of the alt-right and everything else. But that was the turning point, was when I watched you get burned, and on the one hand, at the time, I was sitting there being like, wow, I was deceived. I thought I had been deceived by you at the time, because I bought into that narrative, unfortunately. But on the other hand, I still even then was like, this was kind of a really cowardly thing for Kraut and everyone else to do, to wait to throw you under the bus when you had already left on your own. And, like, they were just kind of, they burned you in effigy over and over again. You weren't even around to respond to them, so that was when they attacked, so they wouldn't have to deal with any kind of retaliation.
Right, I mean, that's the fascinating thing to me, is that, like, I mean, Kraut is one thing, because he's sort of an emotionally reactive person, and in some sense, I can see how, from his perspective at the time, it seemed like I was provoking him. I can understand from Kraut's perspective, because he is very emotional about that kind of thing. I'm not saying that makes it right, but I'm saying I understand how he convinced himself that that's what was going on there. But when it comes to somebody like, say, Nick Goroff, I never had any inkling that Nick had a problem with me, because he was never open about it. He never confronted me on anything like that. We would have, public disagreements on streams where we would sort of go back and forth about certain, specific issues, but he never gave me the impression that he would have done something like that. And something that stuck out to me in his video, the Bad Penny video, where, the whole narrative is that I'm actually, like, really a literal, not, like, actually literally Hitler. And he starts the video off by describing me as a former friend. And it's like, okay, well, if we were friends, why haven't you asked me about any of this? Why didn't you try to talk to me and get my perspective on things, or understand my position better? And it was there when I really fully accepted that, and again, this is my opinion, not necessarily Zoom's opinion, but that moment when I saw his video was what really solidified to me that Nick is a disingenuous piece of shit, because he doesn't care to know what your position actually is. He doesn't care to know why you have it. He doesn't care to understand. All that matters to him is that he doesn't like your position, and so he's going to be as uncharitable to it and to you and your character as he possibly can, because that's easier for him.
Yeah, and
he didn't even so much as make an effort, and neither did Kraut, actually. But Kraut is more outwardly emotional than Nick is. So it was more surprising to me coming from Nick.
I can see that.
You know, whereas with Crowd, it was like I mirrored someone else's video that was critical of him, and he saw that and, you know, basically flew off the handle. And instead of trying to talk to me about it, it's interesting because I actually edited into the person's video. I edited in a statement at the beginning saying, you know, this is nothing personal, but you made this video that I disagreed with, and I was going to make one of my own, but this person made a lot of the same points, and I want to give them exposure. So, you know, no hard feelings or anything. And even in spite of that, he didn't actually ask me. You know, he didn't talk to me about any of it. He just kind of did it.
And now with this modern, you know, Twitter battle and his another flying off the handle with it I agree with your assessment that he is very emotionally volatile. It's just like you said, this whole thing. You have become kind of the linchpin in anybody, in the counter efforts of anybody, like not SJWs, but just anybody who doesn't want to trust the skeptic community anymore. I mean, of course, there's people like Johnny Fox who had been in the wings that had beef with them forever, but you leaving really showed their true colors because people, like you said, Nicholas Garolf, Jeff Holiday, Shoe on Head, like people who had not really even all that much interaction with you publicly, came out of the woodwork to decry who you were after you disappeared. And
Jeff is another good one, and it's even more ridiculous than Nick, because the thing is that Nick and I had quite a lot of conversations, both publicly and privately. We I guess we were quote unquote friends in some sense of the word, but he was still willing to, you know, round on his heels and without even getting my perspective on anything, just totally turn like that. But with Jeff, it's actually worse because I barely ever had a conversation with Jeff. I was on a stream with him once, I think. And we were talking about I don't even remember what the subject was, but I barely ever had a conversation with the guy, and he would sit there and deign to know what my opinions are and what I'm like as a person and all this stuff, without ever really having any proper interaction with me. So I think it's even worse with someone like that.
Yeah. Then he just assumes he knows who you are. And I mean, would you say the same about Shu, considering like Shu just kind of, you know, doesn't have real opinions on any of the streams I've ever seen her with you or anyone else on, really. And I mean, the closest she ever got to really, you know, going toe-to-toe with anybody was the time that she quote-unquote moderated that debate that you and Spino had.
Oh yeah, where she basically just quietly sat there, which, you know, as you know, in fairness, that is, you know, a good moderator. She only interjected a couple of times, but I mean, with Shu, it's also weird because, as you say, she doesn't really have real opinions on anything. She's just kind of like a brand name for lol feminism. Like, that's her entire persona, is just lol feminists.
Yeah.
So it's also kind of weird with her because this is what I find funny is she actually used to, even though we didn't talk all that much, we would sometimes talk in DMs, and she would watch my videos what seemed like pretty often. She, you know, sometimes she would be one of the first people to comment, even though I was a relatively small channel. And, you know, she would even watch the ones that were like overtly about race. Like, you know, I would make a video like, oh, look, here's how, look at this crazy amount of crime that black people commit, for instance. And, you know, black people need to take responsibility for this and, you know, stop blaming white people and all that. And like, that's the point where I was starting to become more overt and more able to articulate what I was feeling. And even then, she would watch those videos and leave positive comments and not freak out about them and call me racist. But then as soon as I was gone,
yeah,
you know, it's just really bizarre. You know how
that's what I mean. Like, we can, like you said, it's like, yeah, Spino might have been really autistic, but like he was very open about what all the stuff that he had. And I mean, I took, after you left, like I said, I was very confused and I was upset. And I felt, I mean, this is going to come up, but I felt that not only was, like, I didn't consider that you may have been taking a long and winding path, even during your YouTube career at the time as EdgySphinx, for lack of a better term, because, I mean, career is kind of funny. But
Yeah.
I don't mean to like say that like I'm talking down in your case. It's just like I just mean in general, like all the.
No, yeah,
YouTubers.
I mean the idea of making a quote unquote career out of YouTube is definitely silly.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
But I mean, there's, just for lack of a better term, like I didn't really consider that you had been taking a long and winding path on that until I had seen some streams, and this is definitely going to come up, and I really hope it's not too sensitive of a subject, but I thought that the impetus for a lot of change was Fraulein, because there was a marked difference in your demeanor and how you were once like you started streaming and she would be with you. And in some points I had tried to be more positive and consider, well, maybe he's like a guy coming out of depression or something, like he's coming back to the world and this is him happy. And sometimes I was like, maybe she's radicalized him. And that was my working theory for a while, because I'm not saying like Fraulein was somebody that needed to be criticized, but like as long as we're going to do the, everyone is, equally capable of good and evil, and as long as everyone is, should be equally under the microscope, it was kind of strange that she kind of passed under the radar to me. And I realize now that I was wrong in that, and I had asked around for a while. I talked to Devil's Advocate a few times, though I didn't get an interview with him. I talked to Lazy Otaku, and he had nothing but positive things to say about both of you. And I had taken that interview with him as well as the one with Spino, and Spino was unsure of it himself, but he, was very open about that, and I had that interview with Spino before Kraut and Sargon and everybody else kind of threw him under the bus.
Wait, so what was Spino unsure about? He
was unsure about, like, where... Because he was on the similar wavelength as I was at the time, where he didn't know if you were... Like, he didn't know if you had started alt-right and were trying and had, quote-unquote, infiltrated, or if you didn't know who you were and became alt-right later, or if, like, the impetus for that was Fraulein, or Fraulein was just along for the ride, or whoever. And it's just, it was...
Okay, so it's an interesting question, because, if anything, I kind of radicalized her, because I had been, I had been delving into the subject matter... Even, like, at the start of my channel, I'd been reading about this kind of stuff and, looking at things like American Renaissance, which is Jared Taylor's website, and I even used that as a source for a couple of my videos, even early on. So I was sort of like, I suppose, finding my sea legs. And when Fraulein and I met, she was just more of, like, a basic, like, capitalist Trump supporter, and she was... I suppose she was conscious of the anti-white stuff, but she definitely didn't see it the way either of us would talk about it now. It was kind of like... I suppose the change in my demeanor was, the way you described it was like a guy coming out of depression. I would certainly agree that it made me more confident in myself. It made me happier. And maybe that's an explanation. It's hard to analyze yourself in that way. But I definitely would not say that Fraulein made me into a white nationalist or anything like that, because she didn't have those opinions when we met.
Yeah, and
we kind of went down that road together.
And I mean, that I'm glad that we were able to discuss this, so we could, like, make sure what was what. Because I mean, I don't want to attack or even ever seem like I'm trying. I just want to go for the throat and attack the people's loved ones to get to them or something. But it's like, like I said, it's just she seemed to kind of pass under the radar. And at the time, I thought I was thinking, it's like, why is nobody caring about this? But as we've discussed this, and as over time, and I've started to put pieces together myself as well, I just realized, like, she didn't pass under the radar so much as they never really had an interest in actually, like, trying to dismantle you or anything you were about. And I don't mean like they didn't try. I mean that they didn't actually, like, have an interest in, brick by brick saying you're wrong on this, because they actually cared. They just wanted to burn you because you had, broken the rules of don't tell anybody about, all the backroom bullshit going on. Don't ever do anything but, let us have drama. And
Yeah, I mean that's really ultimately, and this is ultimately the entire reason why they go after, why they quote unquote go after any of these ideas, like any so-called alt-right content creator, or just the idea of the alt-right in general, or nationalism, or identitarianism, or race realism, or any of this stuff. The whole reason why they put on a pretense of going after this stuff is to protect their own image, because they don't like being associated with it. They don't like the proximity that they have to it. And it's not really working. Try as they might, they can't get rid of the so-called alt-right. But that's ultimately what it's really about. It's not so much about actually refuting those ideas, because they never do. It's more about just making it clear to everybody, to every onlooker, that they do not support those people or those ideas.
They're just virtue signaling, because they don't actually want, like, they want their cash cow. They believe that the alt-right is like a cash cow for them. That's the way they treat it, and they don't. Yeah. They want it to stay that way. Yeah,
they don't actually engage the ideas in a serious way, because it's much easier and simpler for them to misrepresent and character assassinate and do these hit piece type of videos instead of actually having a meaningful discussion with anybody about it. And yeah. I think I'm actually really surprised that none of them have gone after Mouthy Buddha, because he is actually trying to do that. He's one of the only ones out of that entire sphere of YouTube who is actually trying to have an honest discussion.
It might be because they're not that smart. Or if they are smarter than we think, then it might be because they know that if they attack him, they'll basically be, showing their ass to the wind. That, like, it'll be incredibly obvious to many of their viewers at that point that they are just milking a cash cow.
Yeah, because Mouthy is, he doesn't fully agree with alt-righters. He doesn't fully agree with all of their positions, but he agrees with some of them, and he's trying to be charitable to them. And if they were to turn and attack someone who is so polite and charitable and is, being very cordial about his disagreement, that would almost certainly blow up in their faces. So yeah. I think maybe that's a viable explanation for why they're not doing it. Whereas people who are actually on the alt-right aren't always so nice about disagreeing, so it's easier for them to misrepresent that or mischaracterize it.
Yeah, they can. It's just gaslighting, concern, trolling, and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but you seem to be, as of the rest of this, you seem to know what you're about now, and you're on a steady, self-made path now, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, even in relation to, I keep saying the so-called alt-right, and honestly, I have some issues with the alt-right of my own. I think it's missing something. It's not going to achieve any of its goals in its current form. And there is a problem with even trying to say that. It has essentially some of the same problems that the skeptics have and that Gamergate had, where it is mostly based on reacting to something that supporters of the group perceive to be a bad thing, something that they're against, and that's essentially the entire foundation of it is, well, we think this is bad and we're against it, and here's why we think it's bad. Here's a bunch of facts and data and statistics and arguments and stuff as to why it's bad. And the problem with that is that you can't build a movement off of just being anti-something. You can't build a movement off of simple opposition. It has to coherently stand for something. And I think the alt-right is closer to coherently standing for something than the skeptics are, but it's still not all the way there. So, that's why I don't really consider myself alt-right, is that I think it needs additional construction. It needs more built on that foundation, and specifically more positive things built on that foundation before it can actually accomplish anything.
Yes. I can see that.
I mean, and the, you know, that's a problem that the skeptics are never going to address for themselves because they don't have to, because they're not interested in actually changing anything. And that's the main difference that I see right now, is that I think at least a significant portion of alt-righters are actually interested in changing things. They have a stake in things. They actually want they want to see the world that they're dreaming of, whereas the skeptics are just kind of like, you know, they couldn't really care less as long as the shekels keep flowing.
Yeah. Well, things like YouTube Saints definitely reinforces that idea. It's just, you know, these skeptics going on streams and talking to their patrons and just taking donations on stream.
Oh, it's totally masturbatory. Like, you know, it's like, oh, do you guys like me? I'm so glad you like me enough to give me money. You know what? I like me too. Like, and that's just like, it's just fucking horrible. Circular masturbatory garbage. It's like, what am I fucking...
Yeah. Well, as for all of the rest of this, so from here, I suppose, as we've discussed before, but we'll be open about it. So as we've discussed before, from here, you're basically trying to avoid drama and you're just focusing on the politics.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I want the direction of my channel to be, and I want my content to be more serious than it was before as well. You know, in the past, I mean, some of my videos were more serious, but others, you know, a lot of them were like bearing style or like undoomed style kind of ponage videos, and maybe I would provide more facts and you know, and arguments than that, but it was still ultimately just, you know, look at this idiot, you know. And I don't want to do those kinds of videos anymore. In fact, I want to mostly stay away from response videos altogether. I mean, technically I did do a response, quote unquote, to Mouthy Buddha, but it wasn't like, you know, pause his video, make a point, play his video, pause his video, make a point, you know, not that kind of response. I had, you know, I had a structure of my own for that video, and then I just included a couple short bits from his. So I do want my content to be more serious, and I want, you know, when I do criticize somebody or respond to somebody, I want to do it in earnest instead of, you know, trying to be uncharitable or trying to, you know, I would rather steel man than straw man, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the drama thing goes, that's what I find interesting about this newest thing with Crowd, is that I haven't made any videos like that, and I don't plan on making any videos like that, and I'm not going to make a response to his video that he just made recently, because why would I bother? You know, it sort of speaks for itself that if you go look at my, you know, anyone who's interested enough in that whole dumb situation can go look at Twitter and see that I didn't do any of the things he's saying I did. So why would I waste my time editing a response to that when it speaks for itself? It's very clear to a ton of people who have seen this video that Crowd is just being a fuckwit.
Yeah, though I wish it was clear earlier to people that he had been a fuckwit.
Well, the way I see it is, you know, last time he was being disingenuous when he attacked me, and now he's trying to do the same thing again, except this time it's backfiring.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like...
Which is really weird considering he had just recently apologized to you.
Oh, I'm not exactly surprised.
I guess it is what it is. Oh. So, as far as just in closing, as far as your dead persona and, you know, in rotting away in the sands, have you been able to reconnect with some of the other people that you were once close with, like Lazy Otaku or Devil's Advocate or anyone, or is it just Naked Ape now?
I haven't talked to either of them. There are a few people. I never really stopped talking to Naked Ape or that guy T. I continued talking to both of them even while I was, you know, so-called gone. I was never really fully gone.
But you still had your Hangout channel, and you were still Israel Zangwill.
Yeah, I kind of had my ear to the ground.
Yeah.
But there are a few people I started talking to again who I hadn't talked to in a while. Like, are you familiar with the ladies on Topic?
Yeah.
And NC Clark and Missy J? I started talking to them again. Who else? No More Dogma. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I have.
Yeah, he's a good guy. And then I also started talking to people I hadn't really talked to before, like Distributist and Fritz Imperial.
But yeah. So any closing statements?
I think it's going to be interesting to see where political YouTube goes and where the political landscape in general goes. Especially now that I'm back. It seems to have pissed some people off that I'm even rearing my head again. So
yeah,
this is going to be interesting.
I hope the drama doesn't deter you from your videos, and I hope that this. I hope that we're not in like a drama bubble or anything right now, where nobody actually cares about the politics on the videos.
Oh well, that's the thing is, when I originally left, as I don't know if you saw that video that I put on Naked Ape's channel explaining some of this, but Crowd basically admitted that he knows I didn't leave because of him. I had my own reasons for leaving. And I just kind of wanted a break, but now I think I'm here to stay. I missed making content. I really enjoy doing this. Mm-hmm. And, I really couldn't care less if somebody wants me gone because, tough shit.
Yeah. It's a free country. or we hope.
Yeah. For the time being, it's a free country.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, yeah. No problem.
This has been Victor Von Zoom with Braving Ruin. Have a good one.
Later.